All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a brand new benchmark from OpenAI. And let me tell you, this one is going to give you a little bit of whiplash. You know how, in the AI world, benchmarks are basically those gold standard tests we use to prove how smart these systems are getting, right? We're so used to these constant headlines about artificial intelligence conquering yet another incredibly difficult human exam. But today we're looking at an AI test that is, quite frankly, just too hard to pass. OpenAI built this highly specialized system called GPT-Rosalind, and they threw it into a brand new, absolute gauntlet of a test called LifeSciBench. And the results? They completely flip the script on what we think advanced AI is actually capable of right now.
36%. Let's sit with that number for a second. 36%. OpenAI's absolute most advanced specialized model only passes about 36% of the tasks on this new benchmark. Think about how completely wild that is. I mean, we've grown so accustomed to AI just acing everything we throw at it, haven't we? It aces the bar exam, it crushes complex coding challenges, it breezes through medical licensing exams, routinely scoring in the 90th percentile. But LifeSciBench? It's built entirely around real-world biotech and pharmaceutical research. And when faced with that messy, unfiltered reality, the most advanced model we have fails roughly 2 out of every 3 tasks.
So the crucial point is that this 36% pass rate is not actually a failure story. Not at all. It's a story about a massive fundamental shift in how we evaluate AI. See, LifeSciBench isn't asking, hey, does the AI know basic facts about biology? It's not testing textbook memory or simple recall. It's asking something infinitely harder. Can this AI actually function like a real research collaborator? Can it step out of those pristine textbook pages and into the chaotic, unpredictable reality of a laboratory? We are officially moving away from testing simple factual recall and diving headfirst into testing complex, multi-layered scientific reasoning. To really understand why this test is so brutally difficult, you have to look at the sheer human effort behind it. OpenAI didn't just build this in a vacuum. They brought in 173 expert scientists. We are talking people with actual PhD-level training and hands-on experience in biotech. Together, they handgrafted 750 unique tasks. And these tasks, they are loaded with over 1,000 attached files, lab figures, PDFs, gene sequence files, chemical structure files, raw data tables. Digesting a raw data table and pulling out meaningful patterns is vastly different from answering a simple text prompt. It's messy by design. And honestly, the most impressive part, nearly 80% of these tasks require multi-step reasoning. That's an average of 4 chained decisions just to get a usable answer. The AI has to read a table, spot an anomaly, cross-reference that with a research paper, and then make a concrete decision.
Okay, let's dive into this and look at the actual structure of the benchmark. This 7x7 grid right here represents the massive scope of LifeSciBench. On one axis, you've got 7 distinct research workflows, things like evidence handling, experimental design, scientific reasoning, and communication. On the other axis, you have 7 incredibly complex biological domains, from genomics all the way to clinical research. The sheer density of information here is just wild. And remember, these aren't your standard multiple-choice questions with 4 neat little options. No way. Every single task in this grid is entirely open-ended and free response. It is written exactly the way a lead scientist would brief a colleague in the real world.
Because the tasks are so open-ended, grading them is just a monumental challenge. You can't just use a simple right or wrong checkbox. To capture the true capability of the AI, OpenAI had to build out more than 19,000 individual rubric criteria across those 750 tasks. 19,000! Think about the intense level of detail that requires. This granular grading system makes sure that partial credit, partial reasoning steps, and those really highly nuanced mistakes are all captured. For instance, if the AI suggests the right chemical compound but gets the dosage timeline slightly wrong, the rubric captures that tiny nuance instead of just failing the whole task. It's testing if the model can troubleshoot a failed experiment or make a real judgment call when the data is incomplete.
Section 1. Practical Workflows for You, Beyond Biology.
Now you might be sitting there wondering, okay, this is fascinating, but I don't exactly run a biotech lab. Well, here's where this explainer gets highly practical for you today. Because the exact reasoning structures that LifeSciBench measures map perfectly onto how you can structure your own data-heavy projects right now. You can take this biological reasoning structure and apply it to business, engineering, law, the whole shebang. Let's walk through what we call the evidence-to-decision pipeline. Step 1 is the input phase. Instead of just asking your AI one simple question, you feed it multiple sources at once, say 3 different research papers where 2 of them actively disagree. Step 2 is processing. You explicitly prompt the AI to reconcile those conflicts. You ask it to walk you through exactly where the sources disagree, why that might be, and which conclusion is actually best supported by the data. And finally, step 3 is the output. You demand a structured judgment call where the AI lays out its step-by-step reasoning for you.
There's just a stark contrast between the old way of using AI and this new paradigm. The old way, which, let's be honest, is how most people still use it, is just asking for a basic summary. You paste in a giant wall of text, type "summarize this," and you get back a vague, kind of generic paragraph. But the LifeSciBench method, it forces a structured judgment call. It makes the AI lay out its reasoning and make a definitive decision based on conflicting evidence. This mirrors the benchmark's evidence handling category directly, and it will drastically improve the quality and reliability of what you get out of the model.
Let's really take our time and unpack a second workflow here: data interpretation into next step design. I want to use a real example straight from the benchmark to illustrate this. So a task gives the model a spatial gene expression dataset from a tumor sample. Step 1, the AI has to interpret that raw data. It needs to group it into clusters and identify specific cell types. Step 2, it has to make a real decision. It has to recommend which targeted treatment approach makes the absolute most sense based on those specific clusters. And honestly, this step right here is inherently difficult. Moving from just summarizing text to making an actionable, consequential biological decision requires actual logical deduction. And then finally, step 3, it must justify that recommendation against the actual numbers sitting right in front of it. You aren't just asking what the data says, you're demanding an interpretation, a solid commitment to a decision, and a completely bulletproof justification. I absolutely have to highlight this quote because it is literally the secret sauce to getting vastly better results out of modern AI. Interpret, decide, justify is the actual shape of real research work. This 3-step structure is exactly how real scientists operate in the lab. And the beautiful thing is, you can use this structure right now for any complex task on your desk. Whether you're analyzing shifting financial trends, evaluating messy marketing data, or designing a whole new software architecture, forcing the AI to interpret, decide, and justify will elevate your results immensely.
Section 2, the reality check, where AI still fails. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it brings us right back to why that 36% ceiling actually exists.
If the AI can understand these multi-step workflows, what's it actually failing at? Well, if we visually break down the pass rates by category here, the lowest bars tell a very clear story. The AI actually performs pretty well on pure text-based reasoning, but look at that artifact-heavy interpretation category. When the AI is forced to correctly read a complex chart or decode a massive sequence file, its performance just plummets. It also struggles heavily with real-world operational constraints. In a business or lab context, this means it totally fails to account for tight timelines, specific equipment availability, rigid budgets, or protocol quirks that a textbook just wouldn't ever mention.
Now, it's also very important to neutrally point out a significant caveat here. This is a case of OpenAI grading OpenAI. OpenAI built this benchmark, and it's their own models being showcased as the top performers. Now, like we mentioned earlier, 173 outside scientists were heavily involved in designing and independently reviewing these tasks, so the science is certainly rigorous. However, anytime an organization grades its own homework, we just have to keep that context in mind when analyzing the results.
Furthermore, we always have to remember the fundamental limitation of what LifeSciBench actually is. It's ultimately a text-based proxy. It can't watch a scientist physically run an experiment. It cannot simulate the absolute hair-pulling frustration of troubleshooting a finicky piece of lab equipment that keeps breaking down on a Friday afternoon. And it certainly cannot navigate the complicated politics, budget meetings, and interpersonal dynamics of a human research team. It's highly useful, for sure, but it is still just a proxy for the messy, physical reality of a working lab.
And this brilliantly illustrates the larger point we're making today. Look at the evolution of AI evaluation. We used to have these old benchmarks testing basic recall where models scored near 100%. Now we have LifeSciBench sitting right at 36%. And moving forward, we are pushing toward true scientific reasoning. That 36% pass rate isn't a letdown. It's a far more honest, realistic signal of the new low bar for AI. We finally built a test hard enough to show us exactly how much room is left to close before AI can truly reason.
So, considering everything we've just unpacked together, this massive leap from simple text generation to messy, multi-step, complex reasoning, I want to pose a question to you. If AI is already learning to reconcile conflicting research and design next steps from raw, real-world data, what's the one field you think this kind of reasoning ability would change first? Medicine? law, engineering?
I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on this, so like, share, and subscribe please, and drop a comment in comment box.